Carl Jung once wrote in his private journals that he'd encountered 72 distinct autonomous entities during his confrontation with the unconscious. Not metaphors, not symbols. Entities that spoke to him, challenged him, and taught him things he didn't consciously know. He called this period his confrontation with the unconscious, and it nearly destroyed him. However, here's what almost nobody discusses. These 72 entities correspond eerily to the 72 demons of the Ars Goetia, a medieval grimoire that catalogued the spirits King Solomon allegedly commanded. Coincidence? Jung didn't think so. He believed these demons weren't external entities at all, but psychological forces, archetypes of the collective unconscious that humanity had been encountering for millennia. Today, we're diving into the delving intersection of Jungian psychology and occult demonology to understand what these 72 forces really are and why Jung believed confronting them was essential for psychological wholeness. First, let's clarify what Jung actually experienced and what he meant by demons. Between 1913 and 1917, Jung underwent what he called his creative illness, a period of intense psychological turmoil after his break with Freud. He deliberately opened himself to unconscious material through a technique he called active imagination. He'd enter meditative states and allow images, voices, and figures to emerge from his unconscious. These weren't hallucinations in the psychiatric sense. Jung remained aware that they were coming from within, but they had an autonomous quality that shocked him. They spoke with their own voices, had their own agendas, and revealed information Jung didn't consciously possess. This was terrifying and transformative in equal measure. Jung documented these encounters in what would later be published as the Red Book, though he kept it private for most of his life. In these pages, he recounts his encounters with various notable figures. An old man named Philemon, who became his primary inner teacher. A serpent, a divine child. Shadow figures representing rejected aspects of himself. Female figures embody his anima, the feminine aspect of his male psyche. Each entity taught him something about the structure of the psyche and the nature of consciousness. This wasn't theoretical psychology. This was a direct experiential encounter with the deepest layers of his own mind. And it changed everything about how he understood human psychology. Now here's where it gets interesting. The 72 demons of the Ars Goetia, also called the Lesser Key of Solomon, is a grimoire from the 17th century that catalogs 72 spirits. Each demon has a unique name, distinct appearance, specific powers, and a designated domain. King Solomon supposedly bound these demons and forced them to serve him. The grimoire provides instructions for summoning and commanding each entity. Traditional occultists believed these were literal spiritual beings. Jung had a radically different interpretation. What if these demons were archetypal forces in the collective unconscious? What if grimoires like the Ars Goetia were actually psychological maps disguised as magical texts? Jung believed that the collective unconscious contained universal patterns of human experience, which he referred to as archetypes. These aren't learned. They're inherited structures in the psyche that shape how we perceive and interact with reality. The mother archetype, the hero archetype, the trickster, the wise old man. These patterns appear in myths, dreams, and religions across all cultures because they're fundamental to human psychology. But Jung also recognized darker, more complex archetypal forces. The shadow represents rejected and repressed aspects of personality. The anima and animus, the contrasexual elements of the psyche. And beneath these, more primordial forces that religions and magical traditions personified as demons, angels, and gods. The 72 demons could be understood as a complete taxonomy of human psychological complexes and archetypal forces. Each demon represents a specific pattern, energy, and potential within the human psyche. Some represent ambition, lust, rage, and jealousy. Others represent wisdom, transformation, communication, and protection. They're not inherently good or evil. They're forces that can be destructive if unconscious and unintegrated, or powerful allies if recognized and worked with consciously. This is exactly what Solomon's binding of the demons symbolizes. Not literal magical control over spirits, but a psychological integration of unconscious forces. Let's look at specific examples. Baal, the first demon in the Ars Goetia, is described as teaching the art of invisibility and commanding 66 legions. Psychologically, this could represent the shadow's ability to conceal aspects of ourselves from conscious awareness, making parts of our personality invisible even to ourselves. The shadow commands legions of repressed memories, denied impulses, rejected qualities. Learning to work with this force, to see what's been made invisible, is essential psychological work. Another demon, Philemon, teaches all arts and sciences and reveals hidden knowledge. This sounds like the archetype of the self, the organizing principle that integrates conscious and unconscious and grants access to wisdom beyond ego consciousness. Jung found that when he engaged these unconscious forces through active imagination, they revealed genuine insights he hadn't consciously known. Philemon taught him about the reality of the psyche, specifically the distinction between the ego and the self. Other figures revealed aspects of his personal shadow, his unresolved father complex, and his relationship to the feminine. This wasn't just imagination. The unconscious was genuinely autonomous, genuinely other, even though it was part of him. This paradox, that we contain forces that are both us and not us, is at the heart of depth psychology. It's also at the heart of why ancient people personified these forces as demons and gods. They experienced them as others because they are different, just not in an external sense. The number 72 itself has significance across multiple esoteric traditions. In Kabbalistic numerology, it relates to the Tetragrammaton, the four-letter name of God. There are 72 names of God in Jewish mysticism, derived from verses in the book of Exodus. Jesus sends out 72 disciples in the Gospel of Luke. The number appears repeatedly in sacred geometry and ancient cosmology. Jung was deeply interested in numerology and synchronicity. He didn't think the number 72 appearing across traditions was random. He believed it reflected something about the structure of the psyche itself, that human consciousness might organize unconscious material into approximately 72 primary patterns or complexes. But here's the crucial question. If these demons are psychological forces, why do they feel external when encountered? Why did medieval magicians experience them as spirits they could summon? Why did Jung experience Philemon as a distinct being with his own personality and wisdom? The answer lies in understanding projection and the autonomous nature of complexes. When psychological content is unconscious, we project it outward. We experience it as coming from outside. Ancient people projected psychological forces onto the natural world, as well as onto spirits and gods. Modern people still do this, just in different forms. We project our shadow onto enemies. We project our anima or animus onto romantic partners. We project archetypal patterns onto celebrities and political figures. When someone deliberately invokes a demon through ritual, what's actually happening psychologically? They're creating conditions for a specific complex or archetype to emerge into consciousness. The ritual provides symbolic language and structure that allows the unconscious to communicate. The demon name and sigil act as a psychological key that unlocks specific content. The magician experiences an entity, engages in conversations, and receives valuable insights. But this entity is a personification of unconscious material, not an external spirit. This doesn't make the experience less real or less useful. It makes it more interesting because it reveals something profound about how consciousness works. Jung himself was careful about how he talked about this. He didn't want to reduce spiritual experiences to nothing but psychology. He used the phrase psychoid to describe phenomena that seem to exist at the boundary between psyche and matter, between subjective and objective. He thought archetypal experiences might have a reality that transcends simple subjectivity. But he was also clear that whether or not demons exist externally, they definitely exist as psychological forces, and that's what matters for psychological health and development. You don't need to believe in literal demons to benefit from understanding the archetypal tropes they represent. This brings us to the practical application. If the 72 demons are maps of psychological territory, how do we work with them? Jung's method was active imagination. You enter a meditative state, invite unconscious material to emerge, and engage with it as if it were real. You have conversations with inner figures. You ask them questions. You listen to their responses. This sounds like talking to yourself, and in one sense it is. But the responses that emerge often surprise you, contain wisdom you didn't consciously possess, and reveal blind spots and connections you hadn't seen. The unconscious, when given permission and structure, will communicate. And what it communicates is often exactly what consciousness needs to hear. But there are dangers here, and Jung was explicit about this. Opening yourself to unconscious material without adequate ego strength can be overwhelming. This is what happened to Jung during his confrontation with the unconscious. He nearly lost himself in it. He had moments where he wasn't sure if he was going insane. Only his disciplined psychological practices and his strong ego structure allowed him to integrate what he encountered without being destroyed by it. This is why traditional magical systems had elaborate training, purifications, and protections before attempting to summon demons. Psychologically, these protections represent ego strength, psychological boundaries, and the ability to engage the unconscious without being overwhelmed by it. Modern people often rush into shadow work or archetypal exploration without understanding the risks. They read about Jung, try some active imagination, and encounter material they're not prepared to handle. Trauma can emerge in repressed memories, overwhelming emotions, aspects of personality that are genuinely frightening when seen clearly. The demons aren't metaphorical when you're in the middle of this work. They feel utterly real, utterly powerful, utterly dangerous. This is why Jung emphasized that this work should be done with proper support, ideally with an analyst who understands the territory. The unconscious isn't always friendly. It contains genuinely destructive forces if not approached correctly. Each of the 72 demons could be mapped to specific psychological complexes. Some would relate to power, others to sexuality, others to creativity, others to destruction. A comprehensive mapping would require a thorough examination of both the Ars Goetia and Jungian psychology. But the principle is clear. These are not random. They represent a comprehensive catalog of human psychological possibilities. Working with them means acknowledging and integrating the full spectrum of human nature, encompassing both the light and the dark, the constructive and the destructive, the conscious and the unconscious. This is what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating all aspects of the psyche. The forbidden aspect of this knowledge is that it challenges conventional religious and psychological frameworks. Mainstream Christianity sees demons as evil entities to be avoided or cast out. Mainstream psychology often treats the unconscious as containing only repressed personal content, not autonomous archetypal forces. Jung's approach challenges both. He says the demons are neither external evils nor simple repressions. They're autonomous psychological factors that must be recognized and integrated. You can't cast them out because they're part of you. You can only make them conscious and work with them. This threatens both religious orthodoxy and psychological orthodoxy alike. There's also the question of whether Jung himself fully understood what he encountered. In his later years, he remained uncertain about the ultimate nature of the psychoid realm. Were archetypes purely psychological, or did they have some transpersonal reality? Did his dialogue with Philemon reveal genuine wisdom from beyond his personal psyche? Or was it just unconscious knowledge becoming conscious? Jung didn't have definitive answers, and he was honest about that. He remained agnostic about ultimate metaphysical questions while being certain about the psychological reality and importance of these experiences. So here's my question for you. Have you ever encountered an inner figure, a voice or presence in dreams or meditation that felt autonomous, that told you something you didn't consciously know? And if so, how did you interpret it? Was it just your imagination or something more? Drop a comment and share your experience. I'm genuinely curious about how people navigate these encounters with the unconscious. The intersection of Jung's psychology and traditional demonology reveals a profound aspect of human nature. We are not simple, unified beings. We contain multitudes. We contain forces that seem other, that have their own agendas, their own wisdom, their own dangers. The 72 demons, whether you view them as literal spirits or archetypal forces, represent the complexity of the human soul. They remind us that psychological wholeness isn't about being good, pure, or perfect. It's about acknowledging and integrating everything we are, including the parts we'd rather deny. That's the real forbidden knowledge. Not that demons exist, but that they exist within us, and that facing them is the path to becoming whole. Jung's confrontation with the unconscious nearly destroyed him, but it also made him who he became. It gave him insights that revolutionized psychology and continue influencing how we understand consciousness today. The 72 demons he encountered, by whatever name we call them, taught him that the psyche is vast, deep, and filled with autonomous forces that demand recognition. Ignoring them doesn't make them go away. It just ensures they control us from the shadows. Facing them, learning their names, understanding their natures, that's how we move from being controlled by unconscious forces to consciously integrating them into our lives. That's the real magic. Not commanding spirits, but becoming whole human beings who can hold both light and darkness without being destroyed by either. If this exploration into the hidden depths of Jungian psychology and the archetypal meaning of demons resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. We're delving into the complex intersections of psychology, philosophy, and the occult, examining the ideas that challenge conventional thinking and expose uncomfortable truths about human nature. Don't miss what's coming next. Thanks for watching, and remember, the demons you fear are the parts of yourself waiting to be integrated. Face them, and you might just become free.